Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland. With me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. You may have asked yourself the question, should I tell my guests where to sit? And today I'm going to give you the answer to that. My name is Kelly. I'm the host of the Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast. And today we're talking all about assigned and not assigned wedding seating. Now, last week we spoke all about wedding table shapes, and it's a really great idea to have a listen to that if you haven't yet. It was episode 111, where I spoke through different shapes of wedding tables and how many people can fit around each one to give you a bit of an idea of how you can start to visualize your wedding venue. But when it comes to where everybody should actually sit, there's so many different options available to you. And today I'm going to walk you through two solid contenders for what you could do. They're called assigned seating and not assigned or open seating. And I'm going to walk you through the pros and cons of each. And then I'm going to end by giving you a couple of compromises if you don't feel like you can pick just one or the other. So why don't we get started with the very first one, which is open seating or not assigned seating. So in this instance, you've got no table plan, you've got no seating chart, and no assigned seating of any kind. So what ends up happening here is your guests walk into your reception venue and they can literally choose where they want to sit. They can pick any seat available to them and it's theirs for the night. That is open seating. It's the one end of the spectrum. It's the extreme end of the spectrum. And the other extreme is what we're going to talk about in a moment, which is assigned seating. So with this extreme side of the spectrum, there's no planning in the sense of who sits where. There's no assigned seating. It's completely open, and you don't have to spend any time creating your table seating plan, and your guests can really decide where they want to be. So I'm going to walk you through some pros and cons for open seating, just so you can get an understanding of what your options are. Here's a pro. Open seating contributes to a very relaxed atmosphere. So if you're having a wedding of up to 50 guests, that would be considered an intimate wedding, a small wedding, and something like open seating can really help people to feel very relaxed because it's less formal than telling them where to sit. Another pro, guests can choose where they sit and who they sit with. People love that. A lot of people genuinely just want to sit with certain people, and if they get the choice, it makes it so much easier for them and for you not to have to pre-decide that ahead of time. Another pro, you don't need a seating plan. So there we go. There's one less thing for you to do with your wedding planning to-do list. You'll be saving a lot of time not having to think about where you're going to place people because they're going to make the decision for you on the day. And finally, let's go to the cons for this section. It can be a bit confusing because guests will walk in expecting to be told where to sit and then they realize that they can choose where they want to sit, and it is a bit confusing. Again, with up to 50 guests, the confusion doesn't last very long, but it is still worth noting. Another con, people may spend a lot of time milling around trying to decide where they're going to sit. It might be based on, which side of the room they want to be in or who they want to sit with and what the different options are. There could be people outside who haven't come in yet, and the people inside are waiting for some friends to come in. And, it does delay things a little bit by having everything be very open and very, very relaxed. Another con is that you could have some awkward situations where guests are saving seats for other people. Or, worst case scenario, you get partners or families that end up being split up. So let's say, for example, there are two tables left and there's one seat at each table and, a couple walks in and they have to separate. One of them sits at the one table, the other sits at the other table. And you have to be aware that will happen when there's unassigned or open seating. Families and couples do get split up. Sometimes people just make swaps and it ends up being okay, but it does sometimes result in a bit of an awkward situation where someone's going to have to move after having decided where they're going to be. And then our final con for open seating is that you may end up with some tables that are very full and some tables that are very empty. It's not uncommon for guests to drag their chair from one table to the other. So you may have envisioned, let's say 10 tables of 10. And then, if 3 of the tables end up moving some of their seats to other tables, you then end up with some tables that have 12 or 13 people and other tables that have 7 or 8 people. And, that does result in some very full and some very empty tables, which can unbalance things, and it might be a little bit tricky for your wedding venue to accommodate that when it comes to drinks and food and all the rest of it. So your second option is the assigned seating. So this is the other end of the spectrum. In this instance, you will have created a seating plan. You will have decided where each person will be sitting, and then you would have a seating chart. So as your guests arrive at the wedding, they would see your seating chart or your table plan design, and this would tell them exactly where to sit. So you may have numbered your tables, or you may have each table have a different name. Some couples like to get really creative with that, and it could be, each table is named after a city that you've traveled to if you guys love to travel, or each table could be named after a song if you're music lovers. But your guests will see, I'm sitting at table number 5 and I'm sitting with these people. They get to the table, and then at the table there'd be their name at a place setting to tell them which seat belongs to them. So let's look at the pros and cons of assigned seating. So a big pro is it's less confusing for the guests. They can really just walk in, they can grab their seat, nothing to confuse them whatsoever because it's been decided for them. Another pro, there's more control as guests enter the venue, which ultimately saves time for everyone. So we mentioned before with the open seating that a con is that people can kind of mill around while they're waiting for people, and it gets a bit confusing. But the perk of having decided this ahead of time is that guests can walk in, they see where they're sitting, they move to their table and their seat, and it does save time for everyone, giving you more time to do some of the other things you want to do, like dancing later on. Another pro is you can separate guests intentionally if they don't get along. For example, divorced parents, or maybe you've got some friends who went through an awkward breakup, or they just don't like each other, some, people that had a falling out, whatever it is. While you're creating your assigned seating plan, you can strategically, split up some people who you don't want to sit near each other. Another pro is you can choose to seat guests together who don't know each other, but you think they might get along. For example, you could put some of your fun college friends with your favorite cousin who doesn't know many people, because you might know that they are a similar age and they've got a lot of things in common and that they really just would get on very well. So you can be very strategic with who you seat together. Another pro is you can keep track of guests who have food allergies and dietary restrictions. So if you had to give your wedding venue a list of names, and you could say to them, this person has a severe nut allergy, they're sitting at table 7, and this is their name. And you could even be very specific, and you could say exactly where they're seated so that, you don't have to draw attention to the allergy, but those who need to know have that information available, and they know exactly where to find that person. But we do have some cons. First con is that guests might not like their seat or the people that they sit with. So you could spend hours and hours deciding who's going to sit where, and you may end up getting it wrong, and people just don't like it. Another con is that some guests might be hurt or even offended, or maybe even insulted by their placement. If somebody thinks that they are your absolute bestie and they end up sitting at table 25 out of 26, they might feel like that means they are less of a priority, when you would know that that's completely not the case, but sometimes people feel like it is. And the final con is that for you, it's actually very time consuming to arrange beforehand. So it is worth considering that if time is something that you really are that is really special and important to you, then assigned seating is a con because you will take a lot of time to put it all together. So before we look at the compromises, let me just remind us of the two ends of the spectrum. The one extreme end of the spectrum is completely open seating. There's no plan. People can walk in and they can literally choose anywhere that they want to sit. The other end of the spectrum, the other extreme side, is assigned seating, where you've decided where each guest will sit. They know which table they're at and which seat at the table they're sitting at. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. But we do have a couple of compromises. So you might be thinking, you know what, both of these options have pros and cons, and we want to kind of have the pros of each. How can we do that? Well, when it comes to answering the original question of should I tell my guests where to sit, the compromise might help you with the answer that fits best for your wedding based on how many people will be there and how formal or relaxed you want your wedding to feel when your guests are there. So, instead of choosing one or the other, here are two possible compromises, and there are probably more, but these are two to get you thinking about what could work. One is partially assigned seating. So that means that you could let your immediate family and your wedding party know where they should sit, and then for everybody else it's unassigned. So that way your VIPs know where they need to be. Could be something like a head table, which we discussed in last week's episode, where you've got your VIPs with you. It could be your parents, it could be your maid of honor and your best man all sitting up with you, and then everybody else has unassigned seating where they can choose wherever they want to go. Another compromise, which I've experienced before as a wedding guest, is assigned tables but not seats. So as a guest, you would walk in and see by the seating chart that you are sitting at table number 8, but then when you get to table number 8, you can sit at any of the seats at that table. So really, you're letting everybody know which table to sit at, but then they can choose their seat and they can choose who sits next to them. So you're still keeping couples or families or friends together, but within that, they can decide who they're sitting next to, which is a really great compromise. So, to reiterate, you've got open seating on the one side, you've got assigned seating on the other side, and within that, you've got the option of partial assigned seating, where you choose seats for some of your specific VIP guests, and then assigned tables, but not assigned seats, where guests get a little bit of choice, but you do have a little bit of control over what's happening as well. Well, thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.